Hey guys, welcome back, and we have another week of box office, so let's get into it. Up first, we have Juliet, 93% last week and 786K to 92% and 680K. That is a horrific drop, and we've seen now 2 weeks in a month where Juliet and many shows have fallen to very significant decreases, and you have to wonder, why is this happening? Although with Juliet, I do think it is the fact that it's been here for about 3 years, and you start to see musicals do these kind of numbers. It's recouped its investment, so even if it does close at the end of the year, and I do think that is a distinctive possibility, it still had a very successful time on Broadway, and I do think that, it wouldn't be like, oh my god, like Juliet didn't have a long time, because it did. It's had a decent 2025. It did amazing in the January to May category, but then with most shows it fell in May, and then we saw a decrease in the box office, and then over the summer it just did okay. And now we're seeing in the month of September that the show has pretty much consistently stayed at around 600 and 700K, 500K at the beginning of the month. And again, I think, I don't even know when the last time it made $1 million was. It was months and months ago. So that's not a great thing. But these are just way too low numbers. Juliet cannot sustain inconsistent grosses, which in my opinion, no musical having inconsistent grosses is a good thing, even if like it's doing 1.3 and then the next week it's doing 700K. That's not good business. And so I do think that Juliet is in that kind of position where its numbers are not sustainable and it's losing money more than it's making money. Now again, they could tough it out, see how it does over the next month, because again, they did decent over the summer. That they might say, how do we do in the next month? My thing is, if I was a producer, I'd say, let's give it one more month. If we're still doing 700 and 600K, I think we should just end it, if they get back up to 800,000, 900,000, that's awesome. Ideally, they would do $1 million. But yeah, I think we are seeing Juliet's slow decline, and we saw that last fall, but we were able to get a boost because they had a couple of stunt casting over the course of the last year. Vista Social Club, 101% and 1,220,629 to 98% and 1,055,187. Death Becomes Her, 97% both weeks, and 1,387,531 last week, and 1,295,259. Hadestown continues to defy all odds. Last week, 97%, this week 93%, and 724K last week, and 772K this week. Hadestown has had a pretty moderately okay 2025. They did weaker in the summer than they would have liked. I think they were doing mainly 7s and 6s. And now we're seeing something where we're in the fall, there's not a lot of big names in the show, and it's doing solid numbers. The great thing about Hadestown is that it doesn't need to make 850K a week to survive. And so we've counted out Hadestown many times since 2023, but it seems like they keep on saying, yes, we can. So I don't doubt this show. And I do think it will be here this time next year, unless we get into catastrophically bad numbers. That meaning it goes from consistently doing 700,000 to now we're doing 400, 500K. That is, again, I think the threshold where I'm like, okay, we're in trouble. Hell's Kitchen, 94% to 83%, and 1,022,953 to 1,165,554. And I guess Alicia Keys came and did a couple of concerts, so that's why the numbers went up. So I'll be interested to see how much it falls. But I do think that it's gonna stay in the moderately low $1 million club. Just in Time sells out 1,331,598 to this week's 1,309,484. Maybe Happy Ending, 100% and 1,228,728 to 96% and 1,169,909. Moulin Rouge, 99% and 1,112,115 to 94% and 986K. Again, I do think that this will close at the end of the year, or if not next year. I just don't see how they've been losing money more weeks than they've made money this year, I believe. Mincemeat, and that's a limited engagement, and I think it's going to stay that way. 99% and 703K to 86% and 620K. Ragtime, with 3 performances, sold out and 451K, and that is also a limited engagement. 87% and 702K to 62% and 498K. I do think it is time for 6 to close, and if not, it will close next year. It's had a pretty mediocre year. It did a lot weaker than they would have liked over the summer, and now we are seeing catastrophically terrible numbers. We saw this at the beginning of the month for 6 as well, so while I do think it is because of other factors, I do think 6 is nearing the end of its time. But again, these numbers are not unexpected considering that it's been here for 3 years now, and it's done pretty consistently well. Very inexpensive compared to other musicals. 498K for any musical is not good. Stranger Things, 76% and 891K to 69% and 703K. I mean, at this point, if it wasn't Stranger Things, it'd be closed. Gatsby shockingly fell last week to 91%. And 961K to 69% and 784K. You know, The Great Gatsby is in the line of tradition of musicals that don't get any Tony noms or wins, panned by critics, but audiences love them. But that makes them a bit niche. The Addams Family and Finding Neverland being great examples. Now, all 2 of those shows lasted for, at the most, 2 years. I've been seeing a lot less momentum and hype around it. I feel like it was at its peak post-Tonys and when Jeremy left, and even when he left it was doing better. So I do think that Gatsby is just starting to lose steam, pure and simply, and I think that goes to show that getting good critic responses and having audiences that love it overall, which a lot of audiences hate this Gatsby. I forgot to mention this, but Great Gatsby I do think will close at the end of this year, or maybe even next year, because it hasn't made $1 million since July. So that's horrible for a musical that's weekly operating costs are in the 900K area, 900,000K area. It hasn't made $1 million since July, guys. July. That's bad. That's really bad. So I do think that Gatsby's struggling a lot. If they had a better summer, I would think that they could take it. They still could push ahead, and I think they could make it. But based off of how it's done over the last 2.5 months, it's not looking good. So if you want to see Gatsby, I would see it now, because it's very inconsistent, too low. I mean, the lowest that this can go is like 960K. You know, in my opinion, 850K is like the lowest it can go, and that's still bad. The show kind of needs to ideally be doing 1.1 million plus a week, which is a lot to ask of a big show. But that's the reality of the economics of musicals. But yeah, anyways, back to the video, or to the more well-quality part. And then The Outsiders, 99% and 1,209,898 to 87% and 871K, which was a 338K decrease. But The Outsiders, as we have seen in September, has had 2 massive decreases. Many say this could be because the OG cast left, the tour is starting. I think those are factors, but that wouldn't make it fall by 338K. That is unheard of for a Best Musical winner based on a very popular IP that was consistently doing 1.2 million plus for over a year to now be falling this heavily, this quick into its run. If this was this time next year, still concerning, but it would make more sense. And so you're like, it won Best Musical, it has this amazing fan base, people love to go and see it, so like, what's happening? And I do think that I was stifled, and I honestly don't have all the answers, but what I do know is I think we might be seeing a new development with the Broadway musical, where Best Musical winners or even intellectual properties like The Outsiders have less of a longevity than before. And that is super concerning and super bad for the future of musical theater. I have a video coming out about the New York Times article about how musicals are in trouble. I was supposed to put that out last week, but I didn't have time, but it's coming out. That's going to be like 30 minutes, so it's going to be a much more in-depth explanation. But to make it short and simple, I think that the 5 things that I've come up with is, 1, Waiting for Godot is starting performances. It's making 1.6 mil. Its average ticket is $200. I do think that these star-studded plays have a huge cons for the musical economy, because they're so expensive that that you can't see any show but that one show, or you're only interested and have focus on that one show, and once you've seen it, you're out. Or even if you have the money to see another musical, you're just not really wanting to because, well, I saw, it doesn't have a big movie star in it and whatever. So I do think that that business model, while good for the producers of those plays, is bad for the business of musical theater because it takes away a lot of the audience that would have otherwise seen the productions. And I do think of Waiting for Godot, Glengarry Glen Ross, Othello, Good Night and Good Luck. Didn't happen this year. We wouldn't have had record grosses or attendance, I think, but I do think the newer musicals would have done better. The second thing is, we're going to call this person Orange Clownfish. And Orange Clownfish's policies are screwing up everything, making things expensive, making people not want to come to visit America, and that takes a huge hit on IP properties. 3, I do think, Brody Grant and the tour starting plays a factor, but I think it wouldn't have had this impact of a factor. If it does, then Brody Grant should be getting paid millions. He should be in the next big play. The 4th reason is, again, the unexpected thing that I've said about new musicals, and the oversaturation of everything. And I do think that the OG fan base, the young people, have seen it so many times that they might just not be interested in seeing it now. But I do think it is I've never seen this before, where a Best Musical winner has 2 of the biggest drops of the month. And was it profitable this week? Probably, maybe not. I don't know. Not if it did, not by much. Will it close anytime soon? No. I think The Outsiders is going to be here for many more years to come. But I think that this interesting development that I think we're going to need to see more data on, we're going to have to see more stuff on. We won't know the answer for a while, but as you see, people don't want to invest in musicals. Audiences are way more conservative to see things. They want to see the big movie star, they want to see the IP property, and we're just seeing how bad, the current presidential administration is having on business, but then also how the COVID pandemic has still to this day affects the musical theater scene in New York City to a very high level that we haven't recovered from. So very scary times, very unexpected times, and baffling times. Again, this is completely unexpected, and again, it just might show that, musicals have less longevity, and I can't even compare that to Hadestown because that didn't have, it closed for like a year and a half after. And Dear Evan Hansen and Hamilton with these mega hits, although Dear Evan Hansen's grosses went down in a year from when it opened, but not to this extent. So those are my thoughts. Like, sub, comment, follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.